DogWorks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dogworks. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com.
Hi, this is Alex Stein, co-host of Mushing Radio on DogWorks Radio. We just completed our first storytelling season on the 1925 Serum Run. Almost 100 years later, the 1925 Serum Run is something that is still inspirational, amazing, and in many ways larger than life. We've gathered all of these episodes together on one page to make it easier for you to listen to them in order. Just go to dogworksradio.com/serumrun. That's SERUMRUN, no space, dogworksradio.com/serumrun. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to DogWorks Radio at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever it is that you go to listen to podcasts.
Start your day tomorrow with The Daily Dog with Michelle Forto, the morning podcast on DogWorks Radio. Apple Podcast reviewer Patty Christensen calls it funny, smart, and filled with all the info I want to know about dogs. I love this show. Wake up with The Daily Dog. Available on DogWorks Radio on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your shows.
Radio Free Palmer 89.5 KVRF presents Mushing Radio, hosted by Robert Forto. Mushing Radio is about dog-powered sports, living in the Great White North, and mushing. Visit our website at mushingradio.com. Here is your host, Robert Forto.
Hello, welcome everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to our 2018 Iditarod coverage here on Mushing Radio. You can find us over on Radio Free Palmer, 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley in Alaska. You can also find us over on dogworksradio.com. We're also on social media under the same name, and wherever you find your podcasts, you can find DogWorks Radio and Mushing Radio as well. And I'm joined today by my co-host. His name is Alex Stein, calling in from California. Alex, how's it going?
It's going great, Robert. We have quite an interesting race shaping up right now. It's there's some stuff that was unexpected, and some stuff we're past the halfway point for the leaders, and it's certainly shaping up to be a very interesting race.
It is, and some of the front runners that we had talked about are pretty much staying there. As we've talked about in the last couple of days, everybody is doing their 24s now, or most of the pack is already done. So now is when the real race starts. Everything is pretty much on an even keel from this point forward. Everybody's racing under the same time without too many more disruptions. Where are folks at on the trail right now?
So right now, we have a very interesting race at the front of the pack right now. Yor Olsum and Mitch Seavey are both at Grayling. Nick Pettit is a couple of miles behind them, followed by Richie Deal, Pete Kaiser, Ray Reddington Jr., Michelle Phillips, Hugh Neff, Matt Hall, Ali Zirkle. The one sort of interesting monkey wrench to throw into this is Nick Pettit has all of these competitors have taken their 24 already, and looking at the standings, it seems that almost everyone who's still in the race has taken their 24 or is in the process of taking their 24. Looking at the top racers right now, Nick Pettit has also completed his 8-hour layover on the Yukon River. So although Nick is slightly behind Mitch and Yor, it's not quite in Grayling yet, but should be very shortly, he has the advantage of already having taken that 8-hour rest. So at some point, Mitch and Yor are going to have to sit in a checkpoint for 8 hours, while Nick can potentially use that time to get ahead.
So can you refresh our memories a little bit about the mandatory rest, maybe for people that are just joining us for the first time?
Sure. So every team has to take a 24-hour rest at some point on the trail. And when they take that rest, it's actually for most of the teams, it's more than 24 hours because they build in the starting differential for it. So teams start from Willow at 2-minute increments, and I believe there were 67 teams. So the team that starts first would actually have a 24-hour layover that was 26 hours and some change, and then the team that started last, which this year was Hugh Neff, would have exactly 24 hours. So after they take the 24, that differential from their starting positions is all evened out. In addition to that, teams have to take an 8-hour mandatory rest at any of the checkpoints along the Yukon River, and they can choose which of the checkpoints they're going to take that 8-hour rest. So Nick has already taken his. No one else in the race has completed their 8 yet. And then in addition to that, at White Mountain, which is the second to last checkpoint, there is a mandatory 8-hour rest when teams come into White Mountain. I've never actually had this confirmed, but it seems to me that the reason for that is they want to make sure that mushers give their dogs a rest and aren't just overrunning their dog in the last 77 miles.
And I think there's a little bit of a logistic thing to that, too. I think they want to make sure that everything else along the trail is in place when those teams stop at White Mountain. So, the press and everything else can get there in time because, 77 miles is only about 8 or 10 hours on a dog team if you're going that average Iditarod pace. And the last checkpoint on the trail is safety. Very few people stop there for very long. Usually it's just a few minutes, maybe a half hour or so. And that is where they have to, I believe, maybe it's just before they get to Nome, that's where they have to put on their bib. Is that right? That's about 25 miles out or so?
Right. And usually people, there's a bit of a superstition about safety, and people, they start feeling like they're almost finished. But as we've talked about many times, dog teams can just stop anytime that they don't want to stop, that they don't want to keep running. So people tend to want to stop for as little time as possible in safety, wanting to just keep the dogs going so that they can make sure that they finish.
Right. Something special happens out on the Iditarod Trail at the first checkpoint on the Yukon. And I know Nick Pettit was the first one in for that award this morning. I think it was at about 5 o'clock in the morning when he arrived there. What happens at that checkpoint that makes it sort of special?
So there's a tradition that the first team that gets there gets I believe it's a 7 or 8 course dinner. That is one of the chefs from the Lakefront Hotel, formerly the Millennium, in Anchorage, which a gourmet chef cooking this gourmet meal on cook stoves in the middle of nowhere on the Iditarod Trail, and it's complete with wine and multiple courses. And it's a very cool and big deal for people. I know Jeff King has won it a number of times. I believe then that meal can be recreated anytime in the following year after the race ends at the actual restaurant at the Lakefront in Anchorage. So you get the meal on the trail, and then you and a guest can get the same meal, in, I guess, more civilized circumstances where you can sit down and have waiters, and you're not, it's not negative temperatures outside.
Right. And just some of the courses that were on there, the main course was a pan-seared bison steak. They also had a fruit salad, like a mandarin salad. They had a beautiful dessert, and as you mentioned, they have wine and all of those sorts of things that can accompany it. But 2 points on that. First off, Nick got there at about 5:30 or so. So can imagine eating a real hearty meal like that at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then secondly, not only does he get the meal, but he also gets $3,500 in $1 bills, which I think is pretty cool. A little bit of pocket change as you work your way down the trail. And then on top of that, it's kind of something to ponder a little bit. I know this year, I think it was Mitch Seavey and Yor Olsson were resting in the checkpoint prior, so about 25 miles or so down the trail. I wonder what is going through that chef's mind if he's busily making this huge meal at 5 o'clock in the morning and Nick rolls in and says, you know what, I have somebody hot on my trail. I cannot stop to eat. I just wonder what's going through his mind. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've often wondered that as well, because it seems like if, under the right circumstances, if it were super competitive, that you might not want to sit there and get that multi-course meal. But it seems that everyone does. So perhaps it's also that you know that you have to take an 8-hour rest somewhere on the Yukon. So if you just do that and combine it with the meal, that might be a good way to go also.
Right. And, I saw a comment on one of the Facebook pages or something like that about the dinner, and somebody said they don't give anything to the dogs. And another person wrote back, no, they don't, which is a good thing, because sort of the allegations last year was that somebody had tampered with some of Dallas Seavey's dogs, and it could potentially have come from, a meat snack or something like that. So it's a very tightly controlled area, not only for the mushers, but for also the dogs. So not only are the dogs not given a special treat, at least by the volunteers or somebody else out on the trail at this dinner spot for Nick, but it's also a safety measure, so they aren't getting anything that they aren't used to. Is that right?
Yeah, and as we've talked about before, and you're much more of an expert on this than I am, sled dogs are working dogs, and they need a specific type food, and certainly there's an opportunity to give them some treats, some controlled types of treats along the way. But, just like there are things that aren't healthy for dogs in general, there are some things that you don't want to be giving sled dogs in the middle of a 1,000-mile race, because you don't want to upset their digestion, and you want to make sure that the food that they're taking in, which essentially is the fuel that's making their race happen, is going to be consistent.
Right. Yeah, and our sort of go-to treat or snack for the dog are salmon snacks. So it's a large piece of frozen salmon, sort of like a salmon steak, and that's what we give almost all the time out on the trail. And we're doing it about every 2 or 3 hours or so. So those dogs are getting plenty of quote-unquote treats on the trail. So you had also mentioned there's a couple other interesting stories that are happening out on the race right now. What are they?
So we have one scratch today, which is Scott White from Washington State, who scratched in Takotna. I don't have many details left. It was the standard description that he scratched for the good of his dog team, which is generally when the Iditarod, when someone scratches, the press releases either say it's for the good of the dog team. Could mean any number of things, or it's for the musher's health, which would then impact their ability to take care of the dog team. He had 10 dogs in harness in Takotna, which seems like it might be kind of a low number at that point in the race. So perhaps there was something going on with his team. He said that he was going to turn around and mush back to McGrath, so that he and his dog team could be flown from McGrath back to Anchorage. Scott White is the musher that some people might remember in the 2010 race. His dogs basically decided at safety, as we were talking about earlier, he stopped at safety and his dogs decided that they weren't going to go. And he wound up waiting around at safety for somewhere around 12 hours, maybe a little more than 12 hours, trying to get his dog team to be able to continue. And finally what happened is he just started running in front of his dog team, and the dogs decided, oh, well, we want to be with him. So they started running as well, and then passed him, and he jumped back on the sled. So I'm very sad to see Scott scratch. I've always really, really loved his story from 2010, which is just one of these wonderful Iditarod moments.
Right. So we didn't have any major catastrophes with bison or anything like that today. So it's been a relatively quiet day in terms of big headlines or big stories. But people are doing relatively well. I mean, we only have had 3 scratches, and a good portion of the field is either at the halfway point or shortly on one side or the other. So it seems that most people are moving down the trail relatively nicely. There was a story about Jeff King and his sled setup, which was kind of interesting. I read about today. He has runners on his sled that he says that feels like a hoverboard going down the trail. They're about twice the size of a normal sled runner. So think about the width of a snow ski he has on his sled, which is really helping out on these really snowy, wet, soft conditions that they're dealing with on the trail. And I also read that Mitch Seavey had abandoned his alternate rest for the dogs. He's one of those folks that will take his dogs out of the team and have them rest in a special compartment in his sled and sort of alternate them. I think it's 2 at a time or so, so you can rest your dogs on the run. And he said with the conditions that they're having, it's just too slow. And that extra weight in the sled is causing them to slow way down when they have a couple of dogs in the sled. You know, a typical sled dog is about 50 pounds or so that's an extra 100 pounds in your sled along with all of your other gear that you have. So that's an interesting development as well. You know, I was also reading an article from Mitch's son, Danny Seavey, and I know we've talked a lot about him. Every year we talk about Danny, and he said that his dad, Mitch, was he pretty much has thrown his rest plan out the window based on sort of the conditions and the snow and all that, and he's just plugging away, and of course he's doing very good. And what I wanted to mention with that, Alex, is most mushers going into this have a very distinct race plan. You know, they already know going into the race where they want to stop, where they want to camp, when they're going to do their 24, when they're going to do their 8-hour, how often they're going to stay on the trail. All of those sorts of things are already worked out well in advance, well before they leave, and often, depending on conditions, that has to change relatively quickly, and they have to develop an entirely new plan based on that. Have you been reading any stories about how things are changing compared to the normal race that most folks try to run, that 8-hour run and then maybe a 4 or 6 hour rest and so on and so forth?
Not specifically, but I've noticed in looking at the statistics and the tracker that it does seem like a lot of people are having to rejigger their plans in the middle. And it's the sort of thing where when you have as much experience on the runners as someone like Mitch Seavey does, I would imagine that that's something that's a little bit easier to do, as opposed to if you're a rookie or you've only run the race a few times, you may not have the experience to be able to throw out your plan and know instinctively what's a good way to go. I wanted to mention just very briefly when you were talking about Jeff and those wider runners, Jeff King. For people who may not be as familiar with Iditarod, Jeff is someone who has, throughout the years, been really well known in mushing circles for introducing innovations to to the way his sled works and those sort of things that then are adopted by many, many other racers. I believe Jeff was the first person to have a sled that enabled you to sit down on back of the runners, which then became a fairly normal sled design for Iditarod mushers. I believe he may have been the first person to introduce the idea of having trailers where you could put dogs in the back, although that's now been eliminated by the changes in the rules. So it would be interesting to me to see if, if we have similar snow years and similar conditions, if other people start adapting Jeff King's newest innovation.
Right. I know that Ken Anderson did something very similar last year on his sled, and they were going the Fairbanks route, which is also typically a very snowy route compared to what it is typically down here in the last few years. And what he had that same sort of thick or wide runner system just at the front of his runners, if I remember correctly. So he had a very wide ski-like runner at the front, and then they sort of tapered down into your typical 3 or 4 inch wide runners, towards the back. So I would tend to think that a wider ski at the front, very similar to like a snow machine or a snowmobile, it sort of catches that snow and propels it backwards compared to having just those little thin runners going through this very thick snow. It would really bog down a typical dog sled that we have today. Very few people these days, Alex, run toboggan-type sleds like they used to run in Iditarod's way back in the day. And a toboggan sled has a bed that's sort of running on top of the snow, very similar to what you would use taking your kids sledding. And most people don't use those types of sleds anymore. They use the raised basket type sled, where there is considerable space between the bottom of the runner and the top of the sled bed, where all of your gear goes, where your sled bag is attached to. So yeah, I am sort of a nerd for technology out on the Iditarod Trail. I love looking at that stuff and reading about it and finding out how innovations are coming. And you're right, Jeff, as is at the top of his game with that. He's been an innovator for a long time, and I look forward to seeing new things from him every year out on the trail. Yeah.
One more quick story. KTUU reported that there was unexpectedly a lot of Cajun cooking at the McGrath checkpoint. They had a chef there named James Nickel, who typically works off the coast of Louisiana, and for the past couple of weeks he's been cooking for mushers and race volunteers at the Iditarod Cafe in McGrath. And the type of food that people were able to enjoy, mushers and volunteers, when they came in, included things like crawfish etouffee, fried chicken, barbecue, frog legs, and even fried alligator.
Wow!
And so some of the volunteers who were able to sample that said that it was a very strange experience, but wonderful. Sharon Taylor from Willow said she had alligator for the first time, and she reported that it tasted a lot like chicken, but with a little bit of a fishy taste to it.
Yeah, I've had a lot of that food in my day. My dad was in the Marines, so we spent a lot of time in the southern United States. So I've had a taste or two of frog legs and alligator and catfish and all of that. I love that type of cooking. But it's interesting, Alex, that here they are literally in the middle of nowhere. And you would think of moose stew and, moose burgers and that sort of stuff, caribou steaks and all that kind of stuff. And here we have this guy, this chef, whipping up some stuff that probably a lot of these folks have never had a chance to try in their entire lives.
Yeah. And, it's very interesting because some of us from outside Alaska think of some of the things that are eaten in Alaska as being exotic, but for people in Alaska, they get something that's exotic for them. So I think that's pretty fantastic as well.
You know, it is, and I got to say a quick story here, Alex. A couple of years ago, this is how things happen in Alaska. A couple of years ago, they opened up the first Olive Garden, and down in the lower 48, Olive Garden is kind of not a big deal. You go there if you want some Italian food, but it's probably not the first place that you would think of if you want a nice spaghetti dinner or something. I tell you what, Alex, there was a line around the building for weeks of people trying to get into the Olive Garden to have a taste of something that they are not used to having up here. And, not only do we have things like the Olive Garden, but there are many types of restaurants that we just do not have up here. It's exciting to see a new fast food place come up. People went crazy when the Krispy Kreme donut place opened up here a few years ago, and it's just stuff like that is so common down in the lower 48 that we just don't have. I've even heard of people that take trips to Seattle and they stuff their suitcases with fast food like Chick-fil-A and Chipotle and things like that, and bring it back with them because we do not have that type of food up here. So it's a really interesting place to live, isn't it?
It really is, and it's interesting you mentioned the Olive Garden, because I went not there but to the Target that's right next to where that is, and I remember 8 years ago there was almost nothing out in that shopping center, and now it's like a little village out there,
right,
on Muldoon.
Right, when they have Texas Roadhouse and Red Robin and Panda Express and all of these things, which, like we said, are second nature to you folks that are listening outside. But up here, they are a huge deal. So when people go crazy posting about Sonic and everything else, that is why. Okay, Alex, I know we're going to run over tonight. That's okay. But who is our musher profile of the evening?
So our musher profile tonight is Meredith Mapes, who is a rookie running her first Iditarod this year. She's 24 years old, although if you look at her official picture on Iditarod.com, she looks much younger. In fact, you would probably look at her and think, oh, that's a teenager. But she's 24. She's born in Texas. Her family moved to Palmer, Alaska when she was very young, and she took her first sled dog ride when she was 2 years old. She and her family went on a tour with CV's Iditarod, which is, I believe, Mitch's group, and she was 2, and they had her stand on the dog sled for the first time, although she says she doesn't really remember that when it happened. When she was 6 years old, she started doing some races through the Girl Scouts, where they have a dog racing program up there in Alaska. She entered the Willow Winter Carnival, which is a race with one dog, and won it by a fraction of a second and completely got hooked, started running more and more races when she was 6 and 7 and 8 years old. And when she was 12, she got her first 2 real sled dogs from Mitch Seavey's kennel. She's worked with and been mentored by the Seaveys. She now has a dog kennel herself, and has, I believe, somewhere between 23 and 30 dogs on what she calls her Son on the Run kennel. She is running this year on the Iditarod largely with her own dogs, and she ran the junior Iditarod when I believe she was 14, and did really well. When she was 16, she had 2 of her dogs were hit by a snow machine that killed one of her leaders and rendered the other leader, incapable of racing anymore, although he lived. And she took that really, really hard and wasn't sure that she wanted to keep on racing. but after a couple of years, she decided that she really liked spending time with her dog. She really liked building her own kennel up there in Knik, and she was helping out every year with the junior Iditarod, and then started completing her own qualifiers so that she could run this year. And she said that her most important lessons that she's learned from running dogs are that the dog team always comes first, and it's important to always keep the health and the needs of the dogs in the front of your mind before her own needs. She said that she's kind of terrified about being out in the wilderness and being so far away from the comforts of home, but is also looking forward to being able to see a part of Alaska that most people never get to see. And she is currently doing very well. Right now she is in, wait just a sec, solidly in the middle of the pack. And seems to be having a very, very good race so far.
I am pretty good friends with Meredith. She and I have been racing together for a number of years in a lot of the local sprint races with the Chugiak Dog Mushers Association. She and I race every year in the Dryland Race Series up here in Chugiak. And, I've talked to her several times about mushing. And, in fact, I think she is one of the few people that have been on Mushing Radio 3 times. She has been on our show several times. This past winter, she joined us as well and talked a lot about preparing for her rookie run and, growing up in the sport and mentoring juniors and all of that. And as you mentioned, she is very involved with the junior Iditarod. I know that when my daughter Nicole ran Junior Iditarod, she and Meredith talked several times over text and Facebook and things about strategy and that sort of thing. So she really likes to mentor a lot of the juniors as well. But what's also interesting, Alex, with Meredith in particular, is she is a gal that did the junior races and got out of it, and how they do, and then she went on to college and went to school here at UAA for a while, and then she transferred to a school down in your neck of the woods near LA for a couple of years or so, and then came back to UAA and finished her degree. I think it was last year is when she graduated. And when we talked on the show, she definitely had mushing at sort of the back of her mind, but was not fully committed to coming back to it. She had done it as a junior since she was 2 years old, and here she was, a recent college graduate, and she was unsure if she wanted to put forth all of the commitment and expense and all of the, the stress that goes along with training up an Iditarod team. And it looks like she's doing very well, as you mentioned, solidly at the middle of the pack. And what's really cool, Alex, is her mom is the one that's sort of handling her Facebook posts over on her Facebook pages and on their own pages, and she is talking just like a mom on her updates. Meredith is doing great, and Meredith is all smiles and talking about all the dogs and all that. And I don't know if you know this, Alex. I know we may have mentioned it on the show, but her mom, Marilyn, is very involved with the Iditarod in terms of volunteers. She does a lot with the picnic and getting folks up here to to help with the race and that sort of thing. So it's definitely a family affair with the Mapes for sure.
Yeah, she graduated with a degree in theater, with an emphasis on dance. And I know that when she was getting all of her food drops, her drop bags ready to send off to the various checkpoints, she had a lot of people from the UAA theater department who were helping her out with that. So it's very cool, especially for someone who is still relatively young, for them to be reaching back and having, the people that she went to school with and people that she was in classes with, and I'm sure did plays and productions with, helping her out, as well as, her continued involvement with the junior Iditarod. So that's the sort of thing which really gives me a lot of hope towards, how the race is going to go forward with someone who has been so involved with it, even though she took a bit of a break for a while, but who is also getting the people that she knows and the people that she's friends with and people that she's worked with and have mentored to, be more involved with the race as well. So that's just it is a really wonderful thing. It doesn't surprise me. I didn't know that her mom was active with the volunteers, but it doesn't surprise me given her attitude towards everything she's doing.
Right. Well, again, I hope she does very well out there on the trail. I know she's past her 24-hour layover and all that, and working her way down the trail. And like with most rookies, they're not blazing a trail out there. A lot of those guys just want to get out there and have a great experience and finish, and think about just all of the fun. I guess it could be fun for folks out there out on the Iditarod Trail as a rookie. So we wish Meredith well, and all of the rookies and back of the packers and middle of the packers as well. So if you guys have not noticed, who are listening tonight, when Alex picks these musher profiles of the evening, almost always they are folks from the back to the middle of the pack. Almost never are they the folks that you know a lot about, the Seavies and the Boosers and, the Genros and the Mackies when they're running and all of those types of well-named well-known competitors. It's usually those folks that really have the interesting stories. That's the reason why you pick them, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I am, like everyone, I'm interested in the Seavies. I'm interested in Jeff King and Dee Dee Genro, and there's a lot of fascinating stuff that happens with them. But too often it seems like the same 10 or 15 people in Iditarod get 90% of the coverage, and so we've really kind of made mostly a conscious decision to largely stay away from those people. We talk about them, at the front half of the show, and we've done several. A few years ago, we did several of the more popular and more well-known mushers as profiles. But I think, you can get information on Mitch Seavey anywhere. You can get information on Jeff King almost anywhere. But I don't think there are a lot of shows or a lot of people talking about mushers like Meredith Mapes. And in my opinion, it's those people at the back of the pack. It's the rookies. It's the people who are, solidly in the middle but moving up a little bit, who really represent the heart and soul of Iditarod, and I think the future of Iditarod, if Iditarod is going to continue to thrive.
Excellent. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to us this evening. We're well over halfway on the race, and I guess the banquet is next Saturday night, so we're a little bit more than a week away from the end of the Iditarod for 2018, and we're going to try our best to give you the best coverage that we can. Alex, hang on just for a second while we end. This is Robert Forto on behalf of my co-host Alex Stein. Thanks a lot for listening to our daily coverage here on Mushing Radio. We will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Did you know that Alaska Dog Works trains service dogs for those in need throughout North America? Each and every service dog that is trained through the Lead Dog Service Dog Program and Michelle Forto and her team has an individual training plan. We train for autistic, mobility, psychiatric, and PTSD for our soldiers for service work. If you know of someone that may need a service dog, please take a moment and check out Alaska Dog Works on social media and at alaskadogworks.com.
If you like our podcast, there are a few things you can do. You can take a couple of minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also check out all of our DogWorks Radio sponsors and promotions in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go over to Facebook, like our Facebook page, and one last thing, please tell all of your friends by spreading the word about DogWorks Radio. Thank you so much for listening to us. We really appreciate you.
DogWorks Radio is produced by Robert Forto. Logo art by Angry Squirrel Studios. DogWorks Radio is produced in conjunction with KVRF 89.7 in Palmer, Alaska.
For dog training advice, you can contact Alaska DogWorks at 907-841-1686 or visit their website at alaskadogworks.com. If you have a show idea or would like to be a guest, please contact us by sending an email to live@dogworksradio.com.